Brother Dwayne mentioned, I grew up as a missionary kid, and we would come home on furlough, and we would often have to go on what we call missions conferences, which is an opportunity for my parents to go to the people who have sent them as missionaries to sort of give a report on what's going on the mission field. And I want to do the same tonight. I have a real honor to get to serve as chaplain at Perry Correctional Institution, and the Gospel Express Ministries has had a relationship with our institution for a long time. And I know sometimes it's hard to know exactly what's going on, so I'd like to be just one voice, one witness to what it is and how effective it is that Gospel Express comes and serves the institution I serve. But before I do that, I'd like to just tell a story, sort of as a way to set it up. I'll tell you about a fellow I know. His name is Smiley. Actually, we'll just call him Smiley. That's not his name, but we're going to call him Smiley. I met Smiley early in my ministry when I was still in seminary in New Jersey. Smiley started out life not smiling much at all. Smiley was born into a family where there was no father, and his mother was just barely there. So from the time Smiley was very, very small, he had to sort of fend for himself. He had to do things his own way, and he purposed inside of his own little heart way back then that if he was going to ever get anything in life, he was going to have to take it. That he couldn't depend on the grown-ups in his life. He certainly couldn't depend on anybody around him. If anything good was going to happen to him, he was going to have to do it himself. And so he began a life in which he became the center of his life. Fast forward several years, he's been living this way. He just continues every single time to grasp and to hold and to push and to do whatever he felt he needed to do to get his needs met. And he developed a character where it just didn't matter who stood in his way. If he decided he needed something or wanted something, he'd make sure he'd take it, and it didn't matter who he hurt in the process. And he lived his life from that creed, that idea that I'm the center of the universe. What I want and what I need is first, and it doesn't matter who I hurt. He continued to live this way, and he finally crossed a very big line. Somebody finally stood before him and said no, and he decided that he wanted it to be yes, and he ended up taking life. He actually took several lives, and he found himself looking at multiple life sentences, and he's now doing time in a prison in New Jersey, and he's never going to get out of prison. He's going to be behind those fences until he dies. And once you would think that something as dramatic like as that would cause him to stop and to think and to reflect on who he is and what he's doing. But no, that's not what happened. Even in prison, he decided, it doesn't matter, since I've got to be here, I'm just going to continue living the way I have been living. And he just kept doing what he had been doing. He became what we know as shot callers, what we call shot callers. These are people who call the shots inside the fence. Top of the criminal organizations inside the fence. So even as an incarcerated person, he was still very much involved in criminal activity and the criminal hustle game that they call. And he was just a crook. He was what we would say in South Carolina, just a sorry human being. He was vicious and predatory and hurtful. And he killed both outside the fence and he killed inside the fence. His hands were soaked in blood. This is the man who he was. But the Lord was not done with Smiley. Smiley ended up with a Christian roommate. This Christian roommate and him had to share a cell, and they would spend hours talking inside that cell, just over many years. And that Christian roommate would just plant seeds. These seeds, he would talk about a God who loved him, and a God who wasn't going to give up on him. He would talk about a God that could take even the most damaged life you could imagine and make it into something new. This Christian roommate faithfully witnessed to Smiley and lived a life of faithfulness in front of them over many years. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was over many years. And then there were volunteers that would come into the prison, and they would also share about Jesus and what Jesus could do and how lives could be changed. And this happened over a long time. And I don't know the particular circumstances of what happened to Smiley. I don't know what was the trigger. I don't know. What I do know is that when I met Smiley, Smiley was smiling. Because Smiley had given his heart to Jesus. Somewhere in his journey, he came to the place where all of those seeds that had been planted in his life sprouted. And he came to a saving knowledge of who Jesus was and gave his heart to Christ and asked Jesus to come and set him free. And he became a new creation. What's the scripture say? If any man be in Christ, he's a new creation. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things have become new. That's what happened to Smiley. He stood in front, right after he was converted, he stood in front of all his criminal associates and he said, if I owe you anything, I'll pay you. But I'm telling you now, I'm following Jesus. I'm leaving this life. And he turned his back on that criminal world inside the fence. But nobody really believed it, you know. So they had to test it. Like so many things in life, you got to see it to believe it. So not long after that, on a basketball court, they're playing basketball. And those of you who play basketball, you'll be familiar with this. You know, you can throw an elbow hard and sometimes it's an accident. Sometimes it's not. Well, Smiley got hit in the mouth with an elbow really hard. Knocked his teeth in. He lost a couple of teeth. Knocked him to the ground. You got to remember, Smiley was a guy that everybody was scared of. And when this happened, everybody backed up. Oh, my goodness. Remember, he had killed people while in prison. Had people killed while in prison. And everybody thought, okay, what's going to happen now? And Smiley came up from the ground and with blood pouring from his mouth, got right in the face of the man who had hit him and said, because Christ forgave me, I forgive you. Turned around and walked away. Now, I don't know what you feel about that. Let me tell you, as a man who's inside a fence every single day, that is a miracle. Because God had changed Smiley's heart. Now, Smiley is currently now building the kingdom inside a prison. He is a faithful follower of Jesus, and he disciples men, and he works in the kingdom, bringing people to Christ. He is doing to others what his Christian roommate did to him, planting seeds. And you may be asking, why are you telling us this? Well, let me tell you, I've got a whole institution full of Smileys that I get to pastor. Men who have ended up in prison because their lives are damaged. They are hurt. They are broken. And because of that hurt and brokenness, they themselves have hurt and broken other people. Those who have been abused often abuse. And those folks who have been damaged often cause harm and hurt to other people. And God in his wisdom and God in his mercy sometimes uses prison to stop someone long enough to get their attention. And it's while they're in prison, sometimes it takes years, but seeds are planted in the lives of these men. And for many of them, they come to life, and they give their heart to Jesus, and they become followers of Christ, and their lives are never the same. The Gospel Express Ministry is one of those effective groups that come year after year and plant those seeds. As chaplain of a prison in South Carolina, I can say with full integrity, I am glad when Gospel Express comes to my prison. Because when they come alongside what God is already doing inside that fence through his people. And they come and they share the living Lord. They share the reality of a risen Christ that can change life. They bring all that you have seen tonight. They bring these music teams and this effective preaching, and they come in and they just declare who God is and what God is doing. And it's so powerful for lots of reasons. Two important reasons. One is for those Christians who have been faithfully living Christian lives and building in the kingdom year in, year out, day in, day out. When Gospel Express comes, it's a time of great refreshing. It just feels good to know that some folks have given up some time and energy and treasure to travel long distances just to come and be a blessing. That refreshes them. It gives them a sense that they're not all alone. They're not all just stuck inside that fence. That there's a larger Christian world out there that cares about what they're doing. And they love to feel encouraged and strengthened. That's powerful. But then there's also those men who don't know Jesus, who get to hear yet another seed planted in their life. And often Gospel Express gets to be the group that harvests all of that work that God has been doing, but sometimes not. Sometimes it's just the planting of the seeds, and then I get the privilege of seeing those fruit grow. But in reality, it doesn't matter. The seed is being planted. God will bring the increase in his time and in his way. It's just that Gospel Express is being faithful to come in and to proclaim who God is. Gospel Express helps me with the material, the Romans Bible course and the Touch of His Hand Bible course. I'm curious, is anybody in here that's involved in the grading of those Bible studies? Maybe there's somebody here that grades those Bible studies. There's a few. Okay, there's a couple that are in here. Let me just tell you, these are Bible studies that as chaplain, somebody comes to me and asks me, Chaplain, I'd like to do a Bible study. I can just hand them that Romans course. I can hand them that Touch of His Hand course. And these men will take this material to the dorm and they'll work through it with the Bible in hand, and they'll begin a process that for many of them becomes the first little steps towards learning to love the Scriptures and to study the Scriptures and to study and love the Scriptures for themselves, not just what somebody tells them, but them actually go into the text themselves And God uses this material as an instrument to begin that process. And there's just so much more. The singing. I can't tell you how many times these men will comment to me about how amazing it is to see an entire family stand in front of them and sing as one. And how it touches them in a deep place. These men don't come from intact families. Most of them come from just completely destroyed families. And when they see a mother and a father and children who are able to sing together the way they sing, to them it's amazing. And not only that, when they find out that they travel long distances in a motorhome, I had one man even ask me, do they come and they still like each other? He was amazed how that could be. This modeling God's plan for family in front of these men is tremendously effective. To be able to have these conversations, to be able to, when the men go into the living units and just go right into the dorms and sit down across from them, right there in the living room, we have their living room or their common space. We call it the rock. It's just a big cement slab with stainless steel benches, and the guys get to come and they sit and they just sit and talk about God and about anything. It says something powerful to an incarcerated man to know that somebody will actually come to their house as they live and just sit down and talk. It touches something deep. So I could go on and on and on telling you, but I want you to hear this if you don't hear anything else. You've heard that story, that song, thank you for giving to the Lord. I am a life that was saved. It's a beautiful song that talks about on that great and glorious day when Jesus comes back and makes everything right. That there will be people that will come up to you and say, thank you for giving to the Lord. Because of what you did, I am now in the kingdom. That's what the song says. And let me tell you, there are men who are in the kingdom today who are currently incarcerated in the state of South Carolina that are part of the kingdom because of Gospel Express and how God used them. And they couldn't do what they have done and continue to do if it wasn't for the support of folks like you. You have a direct involvement in that work. So maybe one day, on that great and glorious day, there'll be somebody who'll come up to you and say, thank you. Thank you for going to that banquet. Thank you for participating. Thank you for praying. Thank you for supporting. Thank you for encouraging. Thank you. Because of what you did, I know Jesus, and here I am today.